Hi everyone, welcome back. Thanks for joining us today. We got a brand new story to share with you, so let's begin. My name is Calvin, and for many years, I never imagined that one day I'd be sitting here talking about how everything slowly unraveled right in front of me. But life has a way of surprising you, and not always in the best way. Lauren started spending more time on her phone. She began going out more, meeting up with people I had never heard of before. At first, I figured she was just expanding her social circle. After all, it's normal to make new friends. These weren't the same people she used to talk about. They were completely new faces, and the way she talked about them was different. There was an excitement, a spark in her voice, like she was rediscovering a part of herself that I wasn't included in. One evening, a woman I had never seen before showed up at our house. Lauren greeted her like an old friend, laughing and chatting like they had known each other for years. Out of curiosity, I asked, "So where did you guys meet?" It was just a casual question, no suspicion behind it, at least not yet. But instead of answering normally, Lauren's expression changed. Her smile faded for a second. "Do you want to police me now?" she snapped. That reaction threw me off. It was such a simple question. Why was she so defensive? I wasn't accusing her of anything, just trying to make conversation. But in that moment, something inside me told me to stop pushing. I didn't want to turn a small moment into an argument, so I just nodded and let it go. But I didn't forget it. I started watching, paying attention to the little details. And the more I watched, the more I realized that Lauren was changing in ways I never expected. She became increasingly distant and secretive, spending hours on calls, making plans. She wasn't talking about work or catching up with family. It was always about some new bar, a fancy restaurant, or a weekend event that sounded a lot more exciting than the quiet nights we used to enjoy together. I'd walk into the room, and she'd either lower her voice or step outside to finish her conversation. I knew something had changed, but I didn't want to be that paranoid husband who reads too much into things. So I just watched. Then came the day I walked into our bedroom, and Lauren had completely transformed her wardrobe overnight. Her side of the closet, once filled with simple, comfortable outfits, was now packed with short dresses, tight skirts, and tops that left very little to the imagination. The only thing she didn't get rid of were her work clothes, but even those seemed like an afterthought now. Bags from high-end stores were stacked in a corner, tags still attached. It was a complete reinvention of herself. I stood there for a moment, trying to process what I was looking at. This wasn't like picking up a few new outfits. I turned to her and asked, "What's going on? Why the sudden change?" She didn't even hesitate. She smirked, tossed a new dress onto the bed, and said, "It's my hot girl season." It felt like I was watching my wife turn into a stranger. I wanted to say something, to ask her what this meant for our marriage, but I held back. Starting an argument wouldn't change anything. Then Lauren started coming home late. She always had the same excuse. Work ran late, there was an emergency at the office. Her boss needed her to stay behind for a meeting. And I wanted to believe her. I really did. But something about it didn't add up. Things escalated quickly. When she does come home early from work, she would get dressed up and leave the house at night. At first, she gave half-hearted explanations. "Oh, it's just a little get-together. Nothing serious." But the outfits she picked weren't casual. They weren't even office happy hour appropriate. They were tight dresses, short skirts, and heels. I asked her one night, "Where exactly are you going, Lauren?" She just laughed, brushing me off like I was being ridiculous. But I wasn't laughing. I told her straight up, I don't think it's right for a married woman to be out late all the time. And the way she looked at me? It was like I had just told her the most offensive thing in the world. She scoffed and said, "It's my life, and I'll live it how I want." And just like that, the conversation was over. She made it very clear. Whatever I thought didn't matter to her anymore. From that night, things started to break down. We barely spoke. Conversations became nothing more than polite exchanges about groceries or bills. And intimacy? That was completely gone. She didn't touch me. She didn't kiss me. She barely even looked at me when she was home. It felt like I was living with a stranger who didn't even respect me enough to hide how little she cared. I tried to focus on other things. Work, hobbies, anything to avoid thinking about what was happening. But ignoring it didn't help. In fact, it only made things worse. The more I stayed silent, the bolder she became. Girls' night out became a weekly ritual, and she stopped pretending it was innocent. She would come home at 2, sometimes 3 in the morning, stumbling through the door, reeking of alcohol. Some nights, she didn't even bother saying hello. She'd just crash on the couch, too drunk to make it to the bedroom. I knew I couldn't keep ignoring what was happening. I wanted to believe that Lauren was just going through a phase, that maybe she was caught up in the excitement of her new social life and would eventually settle down. I tried to push the thoughts aside, but they kept creeping back, eating away at me. One night, I met up with my friend Eric, the one person I knew would give it to me straight. I told him everything, how Lauren had changed, how she was always out, how our marriage felt like it was falling apart while she acted like she was single. He listened, nodding slowly, and then he said something that hit me like a brick. When a woman starts acting like this, there's usually something bigger behind it. You need to find out what's really going on. His words stuck with me. I had spent months trying to rationalize her behavior. What if there was something going on that I wasn't seeing? I didn't want to be the naive husband who ignored the truth until it was too late. So, after a lot of thinking, I made a decision. I was going to find out for myself. So, I hired a private investigator. The investigator assured me that these things take time, and I had to be patient. So I waited. Days turned into weeks, and then months. Later, the evidence started coming in. What he found shattered any hope I had left. The investigator showed me photos and videos of what Lauren had been doing. The so-called ladies' nights weren't just dinners or drinks. They were full-blown, reckless parties. In some photos, she was playing drinking games that no married woman should be playing. In others, she was reliving her teenage years. It was surreal, like I was looking at a stranger. I sat in silence as I went through the evidence. It was hard to believe what was in front of me. I woke up one morning knowing exactly what I had to do. For weeks, I had been sitting on the truth, carrying it around like a weight in my chest. I had seen the pictures, watched the videos. I knew exactly what my wife had been doing on her so-called girls' nights out. But I wasn't going to tip my hand just yet. I wanted to see if there was even a shred of the woman I had married left inside her. She was in the kitchen when I walked in, sipping her coffee. I leaned against the counter, studying her for a moment before I spoke. "Lauren," I said, my voice calm but firm, "what's really going on with you?" She barely looked up. "What do you mean?" "I mean the late nights, the new friends, the constant going out. You barely talk to me anymore. You barely even look at me." I searched her face for any sign of hesitation, any flicker of guilt. "I need to know, are you still committed to this marriage?" That was when she finally put her phone down, but instead of looking guilty or regretful, she looked annoyed, like I was wasting her time. "Calvin, don't start," she sighed, shaking her head. I didn't back down. "I'm serious, Lauren. I see what's happening here. You've changed. And if there's something you need to tell me, now's the time." That was when she laughed. Then she leaned back against the counter and smirked. "You really think you can control me, don't you?" Her voice was laced with mockery. "You can't stop me from doing what I want." That was it. That was all she had to say. I stood there, frozen. I had expected denial, or even an attempt to cover her tracks. But not this. Not this level of defiance. It's like she had already made peace with throwing our entire marriage away. She wasn't planning on stopping. She wasn't planning on fixing this. Because, in her mind, there was nothing to fix. I was lost in thought. Had she always been like this? Had this selfish, reckless side of her always been there, buried under the surface, waiting for the right moment to come out? Or had those new friends of hers pulled her into something she wasn't strong enough to resist? As I stood there, watching her go back to scrolling through her phone like I was nothing more than background noise, I realized something painful. I probably never really knew her at all. After that encounter, I realized I couldn't stay in this marriage. Lauren had already checked out of our relationship. She lived in the same house as me, slept in the same bed, but emotionally, she was gone. I was holding onto a marriage that barely existed anymore, and the worst part? She didn't even care. I started thinking about what would happen if I didn't make the first move. If I sat back and waited, I knew how this would play out. One day, she'd wake up, look at me, and decide she was done. I may come home to find half the closet empty. And when that moment came, I'd be the one left scrambling. I wasn't going to let that happen. I needed to take control. So, I did what I never thought I'd have to do. I met with a lawyer and started preparing for divorce. I handed over the investigator's reports, all the proof of her late-night escapades, the parties, the things she did when she thought no one was watching. Legally, I had everything I needed. It was clear-cut. No matter how much she tried to twist the truth, the evidence spoke for itself. The papers were drawn up, ready to go. All I had to do was hand them to her. But I didn't. Not right away. Because, as much as I knew it was the right thing to do, I couldn't bring myself to end it. No matter how selfish, reckless, or downright cruel Lauren had been, I still loved her. Or maybe I just loved the version of her that existed before all of this. I hoped that she would wake up one day, see what she was doing, and realize she didn't want to lose me. So I waited. Days turned into weeks. Weeks turned into months. The papers sat in my desk drawer, untouched. Every time I thought about bringing them out, something stopped me. Hope, maybe. Or denial. Or just the fear of what it would mean to finally let go. I remember sitting at the kitchen table one evening, staring at my hands, trying to figure out how to approach her. By this point, our marriage felt like a dying fire, barely holding onto its last embers. I wasn't stupid. I knew things had changed. But no matter how bad it got, I had held on, telling myself there was still something worth saving. So, I decided to try one last time. Not to argue, not to accuse, just to talk. When she walked in, dressed up like she was headed to some high-end club, I didn't stop her. I didn't even ask where she was going. Instead, I just said, "Lauren, can we talk for a second?" She sighed, clearly annoyed, but she sat down across from me, her arms crossed like she was already on the defensive. I took a deep breath and asked, "Don't you see how your new lifestyle is tearing us apart?" I wasn't angry. I was tired. She tilted her head, like she genuinely didn't understand what I was talking about. And then, with the most casual tone, she said, "What's wrong with our relationship? It's fine the way it is." Just like that. That was the moment it hit me. I was fighting for a marriage that only existed in my head. She didn't care. She had already moved on, whether emotionally or physically. It didn't even matter anymore. I was the only one still standing in the ruins, trying to fix something she had already burned to the ground. I just sat there, nodding, as the reality settled in. This wasn't a rough patch. It was over. The only person who hadn't accepted it yet was me. One evening after that conversation, I was sitting on the couch, flipping through channels. Lauren walked in, her heels clicking against the floor, dressed in one of her new outfits. It was tight, short, and designed to grab attention. She stood in front of me, arms crossed, tilting her head with that smug little smirk she'd perfected over the last few months. "I'm going on a date," she said, her voice laced with arrogance, like she was daring me to react. She wanted to fight. Instead, I nodded, completely unfazed. "Great. I was wondering when you'd finally admit you have been meeting men outside." Her smile twitched, just a little. She wasn't expecting that. I excused myself to the bedroom, grabbed my bag, and pulled out a neatly stacked folder. I came back quickly, and without a word, I handed it to her. She hesitated before taking it, her confidence slipping as she flipped through the pages. First, the bank statements. Then the photos. The videos. Pictures of her at parties, caught in the middle of games no married woman should be playing. She went pale. "You might want to reschedule that date," I said, leaning in just a little. "You're going to need a lawyer instead." For the first time in months, she had nothing to say. When I handed her those divorce papers, reality finally hit her. This wasn't a game anymore. At first, she refused to sign them. She acted like the papers didn't exist, leaving them untouched on the kitchen counter, as if ignoring them would make them disappear. That date she had been so eager to go on, she canceled it without a word. Suddenly, She wasn't in such a rush to be out with someone else. But I wasn't playing this back-and-forth game with her. My mind was made up. I was done with the excuses, the lies, and the complete lack of respect. Whether she signed them or not, I was moving forward. So, I took the case to court. And that's when things got ugly. Lauren didn't take it well, not even a little. She started throwing accusations left and right, painting me as some overbearing, controlling husband who was just mad that she wanted to have a life outside of me. She told the court that I was trying to punish her for being independent, that I was bitter and jealous. She even went as far as making up stories, twisting things around to make it seem like she was the victim. It was exhausting to hear her rewrite history like that. But I had the truth on my side. And more importantly, I had evidence. The more she tried to attack my character, the more desperate she looked. People started seeing through her act, even her friends. It's funny how quickly people switch sides when the truth is out in the open. In the end, the court ruled in my favor, and the divorce was finalized. Just like that, it was over. And as much as it hurt to walk away from the woman I had once loved with everything in me, I knew I made the right choice. Lauren lost more than just a husband. She lost stability. She lost the comfort of a home where she was cared for and safe. She may have realized too late that the thrill of living her best life came with a cost. But by then, I had already moved on. You know, when I first got married to Lauren, I really believed in the idea that love could overcome anything. I thought that if you truly cared about someone, if you had history with them, then you could always find a way to fix things. But I learned the hard way that love is not enough, not if respect and commitment aren't there. You can love someone with everything in you, but if they don't value the relationship, if they don't care about what you both built, then it's a losing battle. Another lesson I had to learn: when someone shows you who they really are, believe them. I kept holding on to the version of Lauren that I fell in love with, not the one standing in front of me. But people change. And sometimes, the person you loved becomes someone you don't even recognize. The mistake I made was thinking that if I just held on a little longer, if I was patient enough, she'd come back to me. But the reality is, when someone makes it clear they don't respect you, you have to respect yourself enough to walk away. Now, I have a question for you all. What would you have done in my position? If you were in a marriage where your partner started treating you like an afterthought, where they ignored your feelings and lived like they were single, how would you have handled it? Would you have fought harder? Would you have left sooner? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. And that's the story, everyone. If you found this interesting, let me know your thoughts below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.